compliment I've gotten many times.
Yeah.
And they say I'm exciting to listen to. So
Yeah. You have. Okay, I'm gonna stop. Like, I'm gonna adopt you before like this minute is over.
um
You're like, but I don't want you to. Go ahead.
so just to make sure we still have your consent, it's
Yes.
recorded interview, and then when we're done, we can talk about the timeline about it a little bit.
Okay.
So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is when you're answering questions, if at all possible, look at the camera part here.
Okay.
I've told people to do that
There are
before.
two, three things there. What? Which one of them is the camera?
If you look at, I can tell you right now.
Can I
I
just
think.
look at the queen?
Let's see.
Can I look at the queen of the face of the queen? Will that work?
That's perfect. Yeah, if you look there, that will work.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Because then I'm talking to my girlfriend.
Um, and yeah, I've told people to look at the camera before, and they just end up looking at me.
Yes.
So it's fine if you don't.
I'm probably gonna look at you.
But let's just start off. I'm going to have you say your name and just like a brief sentence about uh, what you do.
My name is Jyoti Parmar. My pronouns are she, they, and I work for the Sierra Club of Florida as the organizing representative, working primarily on clean energy, but I also do environmental justice work.
How'd you first get involved in the Sierra Club?
Gosh, they recruited me. Um, I was a stay-at-home mom and spending almost full-time hours doing social justice work, and I kept running into the intersection essentially of climate, environmental uh, movements, and social justice. And Sierra Club was one of the few environmental organizations that would be on the right side of social justice as well. And that happened more and more that I would run into them, and they would, we would be aligned. And I don't know, before the year or two were out, they had recruited me.
So, in terms of your work with environmental justice and clean energy, what does that entail? Like, what? Maybe not your day to day, but what does that look like?
Wow, in terms of my work, environmental justice is such a big thing, right? Um, we all have an environment we live in. It was built around us. We were pushed into the spaces we live in through, a multitude of factors, historical factors, financial, economic factors, legal, designed and accidental. And all of those things have impacts on our daily living, on our health, and on our possibilities. What potential in the world is open to us? Um, Environmentalists in the US at least, which is very different than globally, but in the US, environmentalists have historically been men of property and leisure, who are also the people who created the system of slavery and chattel slavery and different levels of citizenship across history. So those, unfortunately, that's the history of environmentalism in the U.S., which means that even the best environmentalists really have to think about their history. They cannot simply follow the traditions if they don't want to be racist, if they want to do what is good. So they have to really intentionally consider how they're going to move in the world and what impacts their work has and what impacts their work has had before, what their predecessors have done and what imprint it has left on the universe. And that's the space I occupy. I work with environmentalists and I show them why some of the things they're doing are not so great, or what they could be doing that would be really truly beneficial for the environment, including those of us who have historically been marginalized.
Where did your passion for this kind of work come from?
I grew up in India. I grew up privileged and having the capacity to support people. Essentially, it's the equivalent of being a rich white girl. Um, and we used to do charity. And then I moved to the U.S. when I was 16. And 30 minutes after we arrived on U.S. soil, I had come across the N word and had to learn what that was. And there's nothing more dramatic than going from being a person of privilege to being a person of color in the US, a woman of color in the US. There is no more dramatic, what's the word I'm looking for, contrast to in your life's experience in that. So I had to figure out, my place in this society, why I was experiencing the kinds of things I was experiencing. It made no sense at all. Um, and it took a decade before I started to think that maybe it's not me. Maybe it's not that if I change my accent or speak differently or I'm more charming or put my makeup on the right way, that life will be better. It was not going to be better. And it because had nothing to do with me at all. It had to do with other people's perception of where I belonged in this world. And I've spent the last, since then, I've spent all my life learning and practicing and teaching on what I've learned because I will tell you, people who grow up with the racial identity and with the racial experience do not, in fact, have a full understanding of how much they are losing in a racist world.
I think something that I think is very inspiring in what you just said is the intersection your identity has when it comes to working in environmental justice and for environmental issues. Um, Obviously, I think that a lot of people that are currently involved, and like you said, historically have been involved in environmental issues and policy making, have been predominantly white men, right? How important is that intersection with your identity and the issues that you care about in your work?
Wow, that's a complex question and multi-part. Could you actually? I'm going to ask you to repeat that for me. Yeah.
Well, let's start with, how important is you addressing environmental issues from the perspective of your identity as a woman of color who immigrated to America? Like, what does that mean to you?
So many things. I can remember before I was assigned a race. I can remember the world I lived in, how pristine it was, and on my visits back to India, for example, I see the impact. Now, as I've gotten more educated and learned about environmentalism of any sort, about climate change, about plastics and pollution, I can see the impacts of these things on India, and I see how and who it impacts in the U.S. And the interesting part of that calls all my being, I have to be in this because first of all, the environment movement and those populations that are active in it really have power in this society. They can, when they get behind something, they actually can make change, significant change, mm, power that I believe I have the ability to leverage. And when I contrast the environmental movement in places like India, that comes from the native indigenous people who are actually suffering. It started there. The Chipko movement, which was what we call tree huggers here today, were forest dwellers who were, subsistence living and who defended their forest by tying themselves, wrapping themselves around those trees, which is a very different thing than the guy with the gun who goes hunting for bears and is upset that there are not enough of them for him to kill. It's so to be able to put that perspective in front of these wonderful people who don't mean to be harmful, well, most of them don't, um, but who have no awareness of it. So I have that opportunity, and I'm able to speak from both perspectives because I remember being that privileged white girl, the equivalent. I remember what that was like. So I feel like I'm able to make that, bridge that gap somewhat.
In terms of spreading awareness about climate issues, and how do you do that?
I talk about it. You can't shut me up. um, I talk about it wherever I go. I am constantly asking those questions. How long has this been here? How did it get here? Who put it there? Who's affected by it? Who wants it here? All those questions. When you start asking those questions, you recognize where the harms of it are falling and who's benefiting from it and who has the decision making capacity on making a change. The fact is, and it's really important to recognize, is that you simply cannot save the earth for human beings if you're not trying to save it for all human beings. The people who have the wealth are not able, they're not enough in numbers to actually save the earth. They need all of us. It's to their benefit too. Not that we need it to be to their benefit, but since so much of the time they've been part of the problem making, but it is to their benefit. It's essential. And of course, it's essential to the rest of us just to even survive in a healthy way right now, and then look into the future and hope for like a really good future for our offspring, for our descendants. But in order to think about descendants, we need to survive today. We need to, as a neighborhood, as a community, we need to survive and be healthy. And that is an environmental justice issue. And it's urgent and it's immediate.
Has there been a conversation you've had with someone where you've spoken to them and you felt like their eyes kind of opened to something, or maybe it's something that someone said to you and it was a new perspective or something that just really moved you? Has there been something like that?
So many. Um, Gosh, what do I pick? Um, Yeah, I am so sorry. I'm not able to think of something off the top, but I know I will give you a very small example. The word democracy, everybody says, that's the way to be. And people don't realize when been asked the questions that I ask, what does that mean? Who does it benefit? Who does it hurt? The word democracy itself, and it is a good word, um, it literally means majority rule. And if everyone's voice counted only exactly the same as everybody else's, then a minority experience or minority interest will never win. Because by definition, a democracy means that the majority interest, the majority experience will make the decision and have power. So our democracy needs to make sure that it listens to its minority voices.
When it comes to climate issues, I think recently there's been a lot of rising skepticism and a lot of, I mean, not even recently. There just always has been skepticism. There have been people who uh, aren't as quick to believe, you know, that climate change is a real issue. How do you go about speaking to those people?
There aren't that many people who don't believe that climate change is not a real issue. They don't believe that it's man made, they don't believe that it's human made. And the way I go about it is that it doesn't matter who made it, it matters that we can change it. That we have the capacity to take action that will change our climate, that will change our experience of the environment that we live in. That we have that power, regardless of whether you believe that we caused the climate changes, um, the way science describes it, or whether you believe that human beings caused it or not. You have the power to make change in our climate. You have the power to change your environment. You have the power to change your policies. You have the power to change the places you live in and where your offspring are going to live in, where your descendants are going to live in. So, is it not your responsibility to actually do that work and make the change you think is best?
Kind of bouncing off of what you just said, you're a mother, right? You have a son, and a lot of times people will say that the climate crisis, it's not an issue about the older generation, it's about the young people who are going to be inheriting it. How does that change, how you feel, and how, I suppose, how necessary and how quick we need to be on our decision making when it comes to the climate?
The speed of our decision making is not even about my son and his future and your generation. The speed of decision making is about my life. I mean, I have 30, 40 years of living to do. Well, 30 some years of living to do. And the next 30 years are dramatic. Like, I do not want to not be able to come out in the summer. And I will not be able to come out in the summer if the summer temperatures keep rising the way it is. I don't yet have to look at what's going to happen to my children's future. But of course, um, that becomes really critical because I want all of our kids, and so do they want to be able to continue to go outside, enjoy green trees, and not have everything, burnt by the sun. You want to be able to walk through the grass. You want to be able to, take a deep breath and smell the pine. Hopefully, you're not allergic. You want to do that. You want to have all of those beautiful, wonderful, gorgeous, and just such a variety of species to look at. Birds in the sky. Have you ever watched them dive? They're so beautiful. I've literally spent hours of my life watching. Did you see that little flock? That's so cute. Imagine not having that anymore. Um, it's urgent. It is today. It is tomorrow, and it is both for me and for my children.
Well, the way we protect those green spaces and this greener future is with climate action, right? But that's a very broad term that could mean so many different things. What does climate action look like to you?
Climate action to me looks like making sure people know they have the power to change the climate. We have fashioned the world. We occupy every inch of it, the earth at least. And that means that we have responsibility to the earth. We take from it, we um, hopefully enjoy it. And climate action means that you make sure that you can continue to enjoy it, which means it's not just about, not it's not just about recycling your goods. One person's recycling of goods is going to do nothing if that recycling doesn't actually end up in the right places, and you're consuming at this massive rate that you have to keep producing new things and producing it in such a way that we actually injure our climate. So it is about creating policy, and it's about changing culture to be less damaging, less consumerist in some ways. You know, um, you don't actually have to be a minimalist. You have to think about, you know, being more local, being more in tune with the seasons, and most importantly, that what you're purchasing, what you're using, is not creating this massive carbon imprint.
Well, if you could come up with, let's say, one rule, almost like a law that people had to follow for a better climate future, what would that be?
Oh, definitely don't. I would not ever dream of telling people how they create their climate change, what kind of climate action they take. What I will say is that I've had this for, I don't know, 8 years, and this T-shirt, I got this made in 2019. It works. I still use it. Um, as long as the stuff works, I am attached to it and I use it. And when it is over, I reuse it. I don't need to be going from trend to trend and flit from this to that. I'm not concerned about whether I'm the most fashionable person on earth. I do care that that I am in tune with the world around me, and I hope people will find their way to really enjoy nature and all of its bounty, and to be respectful of it. You'll have to figure out how you're going to do that. Find the most meaningful way. It is healthier for you.
Well, this one's a little bit more of a difficult question, but
Because these
your
other questions were not difficult.
because your work in climate, if you could describe it with a metaphor or like a figure of speech, some sort of expression that kind of sums up, where you place yourself in the broader scheme of things, like what would that metaphor be? Some examples that we've gotten is uh, people have described themselves as a bridge between, the people who are very knowledgeable about climate change and the people who may be a little bit more reluctant or not knowing. Um, we've had people describe themselves as, a part of a puzzle where, they're trying to build out like the border of a puzzle, and they want people to kind of fill in the insides themselves. So you can take your time to think about whatever answer you need.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good question. I don't know. I do know the one that does come to mind, and it's not, what is, you'll have to remind me how it goes exactly. Um, to whom much is given. What is that? What is the aphorism? Is it, yes, Google.
So, and I didn't say this at the start, but like I said, since we're going to edit anything, if you
Yeah,
ever mess up on anything and want to start over, we can do that too.
I rely on
To
that.
whom much is given, much is required.
To whom much is given, much is required. I am blessed. People um, don't necessarily focus or recognize how much they have. If you ever watch a child fight a puppy for a banana peel, then you will know how much privilege you've got and how much power you've got. And that's a real experience I had, and I will never forget that kid and never forget his face. And I can tell you, I I am privileged and abundant with blessings and power, and so are you. Um, and it is required of you to use that to the best function, best use, best effect.
If you could think back to when you were 10 years old, when you were young, maybe you said you were 16 when you first moved to the United States. What's one piece of advice that you would give yourself, having all of this experience now and all of this knowledge? What's one piece of advice that you would give your younger self when it comes to the fight for climate justice?
Well, um, thou shalt not judge. Um, teach and learn. There's so much learning to be done. Um, Definitely, I would say that when people feel like they're under attack, they respond by fighting back. And the way we want to move in the world is to hold out our hands and walk together. Um, that will bring you friends and build a movement and bring a community. Um, it's really hard sometimes to not fight it.
Last week, there was an event here
Oh,
in
wait.
Gainesville.
Can I just tell you? I know what advice I have. Have fun with it. Have fun with it, because if you don't have joy in your life, ah, it's not really worth doing that much. That's the piece of advice I'd give my younger self.
Um, and that's good advice. I think that if you don't enjoy what you're doing and you can't find joy in what you're doing, there won't be many reasons to want to keep doing it. So I think that people having not just having meaning in what you're doing, but enjoying that meaning and feeling fulfilled is obviously very important. So that's a good piece of advice. I like that one. Um, so I think it was last week, Thursday.
Mhm.
There was an event held here in Gainesville,
Mhm.
and it dealt a little bit with the intersections of faith and climate.
Mhm.
And I'll say when I first got involved in a lot of the climate activism that happens here in Gainesville,
Mhm.
those two things were never something that I really thought of as intersecting.
Mhm.
Um, is that something that you see as a very important part of our discussions about climate? Like, does that intersection, what does that mean to you?
From the people I know deep, who have deep faith, um, I can say that some of the things I talked about, they feel responsible, they feel empowered, and their faith requires them to find both action and joy. All of those things are essential ingredients for making any change in the world. And, this idea that the earth was given to you for um, for your use requires also that you be good stewards of it. Of course, I'm talking now about the Abrahamic sense of the earth being given to us. My faith's tradition, we are part of the earth and from it and of it. It's a little bit of a different framing, but it is either way a requirement of us to take care of it. We are not allowed to abuse it.
You talked a little bit about your experience and your intersection when it comes to religion and climate. When you've spoken to people, has there ever been a piece of advice or a piece of knowledge that someone has given to you that's really stuck with you?
Probably. I'm a better person than I used to be, but I cannot tell you necessarily that I remember the advice I'm given. Sometimes the advice I'm given just takes root. Um, and this is back to how advice is given. The more dramatic and sharp it is, the more likely one is to um, you know, feel some kind of a difference from it. And the more soft and, enclosing and encompassing it is, more by example than by words, the more it seeps into your life. So I can definitely say that I learned to go on hikes. I can honestly say that I am noticing these beautiful weeds here. Those are beautiful, and I wouldn't have before. And I know that I learned these things from friends who cannot stop taking photographs of the beauty around them in the most unlikely places. So it's not explicit spoken advice, but it is an example of how people live, and it's gorgeous.
Well, let's look, say, 50 years down the line, or some people even say
Let's.
that their climate goal is 2050, is that's an important date. What impact do you want your work to have?
Oh gosh, my before I die, I want to see Florida. I'm not that ambitious, just Florida. But the Sierra Club of Florida has the power, the capacity, the reach to transform the environmental movement in Florida. And before I die, I would like to see that happen. And that means that I don't want to hear people talking about the environment separate from the people that make it and have made it what it is. It should only be environmental justice. It should be environmental action. Um, there's no us without you and I in it, and we need to be in it. All of us need to be in it.
In times where people not may not be hopeful, what gives you hope for that future?
What gives me hope? Are people not hopeful? I mean, look at this beautiful sky. Look at these clouds. Did you see the moon last night? It was a sliver of the moon. It was this huge moon, and you could see that someone had drawn that out there. I don't know. I don't know how to talk to people who are not hopeful. I say that we are a chorus and orchestra. Play your song, and together we'll make good music. And if you need to take a break, take a break. It's okay. Be Give yourself grace and give everyone else around you grace, and we will land in the right place. We will. We have power. There's so many of us, 8.1 billion of us. We'd better have a lot of power.
Another thing that you're involved with as a part of your work is, and it was something that you mentioned earlier, but it is your work with the Aklawaha campaign. Um, for people unfamiliar with it, like, can you give us like a brief summary of what that project entails?
Sure. There is a dam called the Kirkman Dam um, in Putnam County, and it was put on the Ocklawaha River more than 50 years ago. And it was probably the first structure that they put up. They were going to make a cross Florida Canal, and they never did because environmentalists came out and showed the impact that all of that digging and dredging and building was going to have wreak on our environment, and how, truthfully, it was not going to do much for the economy either. So that project never took place, but some egos got involved, some politics took place, and that dam went up. That dam has been there with no function for 50 years. It's this um, blocking the river, messing with nature. The fish species have reduced. The water levels are artificial, and people have found uses for that space because it's a dam. One side is 30 feet higher than the other, so people go bass fishing, etc., over there. In the meantime, um, the habitats have been really destroyed. Access to even subsistence fishing have been damaged, and the entire this, if you take the dam out, you would have this beautiful long riverway that connects. Um, I don't even know how long a stretch of water that would be. That would be unimpeded, allowing freedom, free movement. It's a highway for the fish and all the aquatic life, and for the manatees. And it is blocked, and it has been blocked. And who are we to mess with God's creations? For goodness sakes, it doesn't even have a purpose. It's a dam that does not give us protection from flooding. It's a dam that does not um, create, give us electricity. It does nothing for us, but it hurts a lot of nature. It's time for that dam to come down.
For everyday people like you and I who may not feel like they have a direct access to government, it's grassroots movements like the one that you just spoke about that are oftentimes our way of being heard. What role have these grassroots movements played in your work? And I suppose two parts to this question: describe just how important they are.
Grassroots movements. This is where you are in community, literally raising your voice, and that's where you feel your power. When you look around you and you see the masses of people who think just like you do, you know you are not alone, you are not isolated, you are not wrong. And this is where you exchange information and you build community. Grassroots movement literally are grassroots because they grow from the ground up, and they put out these beautiful weeds, and before long they will take back whatever you put out into the world. The grass will grow, nature will claim it. And that's how I feel about grassroots movements. um, it will return everything to its rightful owner or rightful occupier. Those are very aggressive words. I don't like that ownership and occupying word. What's the word I want? It will return, it will bring back together the things that belong together. Is
Well,
there is there a word for the opposite of asunder? Because together feels like not quite strong enough. But yes, I made my point. You can edit around it.
before we wrap up, is there anything else that you'd like to say? I have one more question after this, but is there anything else that we may have missed, or anything that you'd like to say?
Absolutely. You are more powerful than you know. You're more responsible than you realize. And it is the best you can do is much more than you've ever imagined. Go do it.
Well, you actually just answered my last question. My last question was going to be, what would your piece of advice, what would your message be to people who want to get involved in climate change and environmental justice?
Absolutely. Life is short. I mean, it's only 100 years. If I could, I would live many, many hundred years. Life is joyful. Um, Go do that which your heart tells you. Go do that which your faith calls you to do. And, recognize that you were put here with a purpose. You have a reason, you have the ability, you have the power, and you have the responsibility. Go do it.